All right, thank you. That's all right. You can lower your hand now. Uh, so as I had mentioned earlier, this live session, it is not a mandatory one, which is why I think not many people have joined yet. Uh, Nevertheless, we'll conduct this in full seriousness for people who have joined it, in the sense that I do want people uh, to absolutely write their doubts in the chat conversation box, like we have been doing in the previous times, uh, and I'll continue to try to resolve those doubts. Okay, so these doubts, I hope this time would be from the kinematics chapter. So try not to ask questions from the mathematical preliminaries. I can understand you can still have some doubts from that previous chapter on mathematical preliminaries, but if you have them, try to post them on the appropriate discussion channel. Today's live session, let it be for doubt clearing on the kinematics chapter, uh, the pre-recorded lecture videos, the typeset notes, whatever, as well as the problem sheet number 2 on the kinematics chapter. Okay, so with that, let's start with uh, the doubt clearing. So please go ahead and you post your doubts on the chat box. In problem sheet number 2, question number 2, how do we find translation in any direction? Let me just see the question. Uh, question 2. Right. So Rahul, have you at least obtained the expressions for the ux and the uy? Uh,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So that's good. So you see in the expression of the ux and the uy, in both of them, you have a dependence on x and y. So ux is dependent on x and y, and uy is dependent on x and y. But in addition, you have simple constants also sitting there, the d in ux and the e in uy. Now this means that for different points within the material body, uh, you will have, for the different points, different values of x and y. So if you're sitting at different points, the values of ux and ui are going to be different. Okay, that means that the values of the displacement components are going to be different on different points on the body. So if you suppose take 2 points, or simply you take just 1 point also, so a generic point would have different values of this ux or uy. Okay, however, suppose it just so happened that in ux magically somehow c1 became 0 and k also became 0. So if you're looking at the problem sheet and I'm looking at the answer, suppose c1 became 0 and k became 0, then ux would simply be d, and in a similar fashion in the expression for uy, if you have c2 equal to 0 and k equal to 0, then simply uy would become e. Now that means that no matter where you are sitting in the body, which point you are observing, your ux and uy value would be completely unchanging, which means that different parts of the body are having the same values of ux and uy. So this is exactly the kind of situation where you would have it basically means that your body is simply translating in space. Okay, it is like a rigid body motion. It is simply a rigid body motion. Okay, and since it is associated with simply the ux and the uy components, it is those constant values sitting there, the d and the e, which represent the rigid body translation, and that is actually what is written there. So translation along the x, rigid body translation along the x is given by d, and the rigid body translation along y is given by the e. Okay, I hope that answer satisfies you.
Yes, sir. So, sir, in any case, the constant terms gives the
Yes.
translation in any direction, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
But I hope you'll also be able to extrapolate this idea to the rotation, the next
Uh,
part.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So next question is by Vasala Rahul. Sir, can you please brief on strain compatibility? I think like whatever I have discussed in the kinematics pre-recorded lecture number 10, for now you please be satisfied with that part. In the next chapter, when we discuss 2D elasticity, the need for this strain compatibility will be very much evident to you. Okay, so in case I forget, I won't. Okay, but in case I do not highlight this, Vasala Rahul, it is your responsibility to remind me that, sir, you had promised to discuss a little bit more on strain compatibility. Discuss it now. Okay, so that in the next chapter. So not even that actually. So the next chapter would be stress. After that, we would cover material behavior, and then we would cover 2D elasticity. So two chapters later, we'll be discussing this in actual action. Okay. So next question is by Vikram Kumar Mutkani. So, sir, in rigid body rotation, we considered strain tensor Eij equal to 0. So relative displacement between any 2 points on the body will be 0. That states dxij vector is equal to d capital Xij vector. But in our final conclusion, we got dxij vector is approximately equal to dx, but not exactly equal y. Right. So that basically means that uh, unless your uh, that that omega term, that omega vector, it is very small, or the various elements, the three independent elements of the rotation tensor, unless they are very small, that can still imply that in the current configuration, the relative displacement between 2 points can change even if your strain is 0. Okay, so that's how we interpret the rigid body rotation. I know it may be a little bit difficult to visualize like how it can be, but thankfully, at least in applied elasticity, we don't have to worry about the finite deformation terms. So as far as we are concerned with small deformations, our intuitive feeling uh, that if there is only rotation going on, there should not be any displacement, or there should not be any stretching between 2 points. That is holding out to be true. So Vikram, so as far as our course content of applied elasticity is concerned, we'll be mostly concerned, or will be almost exclusively concerned with small deformations overall, and in that this will hold true. Okay. Shubham Uttam Hegade is asking for question 3. Will dilatation be 3 into EK? Let me take a look at question 3. I did not quite get what do you mean by 3 into EK? Did you mean that 3 into epsilon to the power like epsilon superscript K? Shubham, can you please unmute yourself and ask? Shubham, are you there? Can you please unmute yourself and ask? Okay, we'll come back to Shubham's question later. Next, Baliram is asking, in question 3, I could not understand what question 3 is saying. So it is again question 3. Explain this. Question 3b. So, Baliram, your question number 3A is clear.
Yes, sir.
3A is clear. Okay. So 3B is problematic. So
Yes, sir.
so uh, so which part you are not getting? So actually the question starts from this thing, right? Using this relation that rho f vf is equal to rho naught v naught. Using this relation and the result of part A, you relate the rho naught rho f and the divergence of the displacement. So I believe that this u I comma I is not a problem for you, right?
No, sir.
Baliram,
Yes, sir.
u I comma I, is that a problem for you?
No, sir.
So you understand what that is, right?
Yes, sir.
What is that? In terms of partial derivatives, what is it?
Sorry, and UII, sir, in the matrix form, sir. U A1 A11 A1 A1 B1 A2 B2 A3 B3 in this form.
No. So you see u I comma I, that is the comma notation. It represents a partial derivative. Okay, so let me just
Yes.
share my writing app and write. Uh, sorry, not this. Just give me a second. Can you all see the green writing app? If you can all see, please raise your hand. All right, thank you. I'll explain a little bit here. So there I have written it as ui comma I. Now this thing is equivalent to del ui del xi. Okay, and because this is a repeated index, this is del u1 del x1 plus del u2 del x2 plus del u3 del x3. Okay, now we have also been given that rho f vf is equal to rho naught v naught. Now from this relationship, you see that you have this vf and v naught. And in the part A of the question number 3, we had already established that, or we have already found out an expression for the dilatation, which was basically, if you see the if you're all looking at question number 3A, you'll find it that dilatation is equal to final volume minus initial volume divided by initial volume. So that is basically Vf minus V naught divided by V naught. So if that is dilatation, and as you will find out in part 3A, that the dilatation is nothing but epsilon 1, epsilon superscript 1 plus epsilon superscript 2 plus epsilon superscript 3, you can actually express this thing. Okay, you can find out this relation. I won't work it out, otherwise what's the point of giving you this problem? Okay, so Baliram, you please tell me from what I have told, does this make sense or should I elaborate more? I can write one more step here in the sense that from part 3A, you should be getting something like epsilon 1 plus epsilon 2 plus epsilon 3, that is equal to Vf minus V naught divided by V naught. Okay. And each of these epsilon 1, epsilon 2, epsilon 3, they can be represented in terms of the partial derivatives of the displacement. Okay, now you figure it out. I've almost done it. If you still can't do it, ask me again.
So these epsilon 1, 2 and 3, these all should be the principal strains na, in 1, 2, 3 direction.
Yes, they are the principal strains, but because we have oriented our coordinate axis along the principal directions, so they also happen to be epsilon 1, epsilon 2, and epsilon 3. That is the key
Yes.
idea here.
So because in volumetric strain we use the principal strains and stress, that's why. Okay, sir. Clear. In this case, they are oriented in those principal strain direction only.
Yes, exactly. That is the key idea. Okay, so you can actually write epsilon superscript 1 is equivalent to epsilon 1 is equal to del u1 del x1, and similarly for the other two.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So Shubal Jagar, you are writing, sir, I'm finding difficult to interpret the language of the question, especially question number 3. So I hope question number 3 is somewhat better now. Let's look at question number 4. Since dilatation can be expressed solely in terms of the normal strain components, referring to the previous problem, these normal strain components are said to be responsible for changes in volume, while the shearing strains are responsible for changes in shape. Often the infinitesimal strain tensor is decomposed into two parts: the mean normal strain, which accounts for volumetric change, and the deviatoric strain epsilon d, which accounts for shape change. Okay, and you have been actually asked that define epsilon m is equal to like this, where all these things. So find the matrix representation of epsilon d. Okay, so Shubal, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir, am I audible?
Hello.
Am I audible?
A little bit better now. Can you speak a little bit louder?
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, now you're audible, very audible.
Okay, sir. Sir,
Okay, so you
sir,
please ask what is your problem with question number 4?
Sir, actually, sir, when it comes to mathematical expression, like I get to know how to approach the question.
Okay.
But when it comes to like sir, this theoretical part and lots of symbols, sir, I am really confused how to start myself. Uh, Hello.
Do you have a problem with the language?
Yes, sir. Like, sir, in question like 1, 2, or 5 or 6, question number 5 or 6 or whatever, sir, they
Yeah.
are high, mathematical, so I know how to approach the question. But
Okay.
when it comes, but when lot of symbol and these type of questions come, sir, I don't know how to start my approach.
Okay. So can you pinpoint at least, or you
Sir, like in question number 3, sir, like I was trying to understand the question, but like sir, the question, the formula that was given of dx,
yes.
sir, it mentioned no summation implied.
Yes.
So now I don't understand this term, sir. What is no summation implied, and what is the meaning of this thing in?
So I wrote the no summation implied. So that is a very standard way of writing things or giving a warning to the reader that you see in the right hand side of that expression there is a d capital X superscript k times
Yes.
1 plus epsilon superscript k. Now because we have talked about index notation, and we have also said that when the index is repeated, it implies summation.
Yes.
Now, despite the fact that you have something like an index in the form of k here, and that is apparently repeated, but even though it is like that, there is no summation that you should carry out. Okay, it is simply just if you set k equal to 1, it is simply dx superscript 1 is equal to d capital X superscript 1 into 1 plus epsilon superscript 1, finished. Then for dx2 is equal to d capital X2 into 1 plus epsilon 2, like that. These are three separate things that is being implied.
So that is, sir, I was trying to write like epsilon 1 plus epsilon 2 plus epsilon 3. Then I suddenly saw that no summation implied. So these things have really confused me during solving the question.
So that's why you are doing this course. that once you will be confused, now you have asked the question and you will see this kind of a language written in many places, in many books, many standard textbooks and many research papers also. So next year when you will be doing your MTech project, you will encounter this kind of language and many other standard such things. So you have to get used to it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Like there are lots of other standard things. You see, like as you have passed through your high school, as you have passed through your plus two, your undergraduate, you have picked up a lot of language in the process and you don't think about it right now. Okay, that has become like as part of your system. But you imagine a kid encountering that kind of a language, you go back in time and you'll see that at one point in time those things were difficult, but maybe 1 year later it won't be so difficult. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. There is absolutely no reason to get confused. Whenever you feel that something is looking a little bit alien to you, you ask me without any hesitation, no problem.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. But you did not mention about question number 4.
Sir, like I was. It was very difficult for me to interpret question number 3 and 4. That's why I tried to understand, but
no. But we have not I have not discussed question number 4 with you yet. So your doubt will still remain a doubt if you don't resolve it now. So please ask.
Sir, I better try once again and then I will ask.
No, if it is a problem with language, I think it is better for you to get it clarified. You see, what I'm basically trying to say here is that you simply have the strain tensor epsilon, right?
Yes, sir.
So this strain tensor, you have various elements in it like epsilon 1, epsilon 1, 2 and all these things.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all the 6 elements are there.
Yes,
6 independent elements are there. Now, what I'm saying here, the key sentence as part of the question is that often you see this sentence, often the strain tensor is decomposed into 2 parts. The mean normal strain epsilon m, which accounts for volumetric change, and the deviatoric strain epsilon d. So forget about the physical interpretation regarding the volumetric change, forget about the physical interpretation which I'm mentioning about the shape change. You just think of it like that. What I'm basically asking you to think about is that this entire strain tensor epsilon, that is equal to epsilon m plus epsilon d. That much is fine.
Yes.
It can be written. Okay. Any matrix you can write it as a sum of two other matrices. Okay, or 3 other matrices or 100 other matrices. No, is no problem. But now I am in part A of question number 4. I am asking you to pinpointedly think about this epsilon m through this particular definition. That definition is saying that epsilon m is equal to 1/3 delta dot u times the identity matrix. Okay, so you see this 1/3 times delta dot u. If I can just go back to my writing app, let me use a separate page for this. So are you seeing this page?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so 1/3 delta dot u vector. Delta dot u vector is what? That is the divergence of the velocity vector. Oh, sorry, the displacement vector. Now this is equal to 1/3 del u1 del x1 plus del u2 del x2 plus del u3 del x3. Okay. Now see, there are certain things which I will absolutely assume that you know. So things like this, that the divergence of the displacement or divergence of any vector, this should immediately be at your fingertips. If you are not having these things at your fingertips, I strongly suggest all of you, not just the student who is asking me the question, that you please go back and refresh a little bit of vector calculus from your undergraduate days. Otherwise, it will be extremely difficult for you in this course. Okay, this is the absolute necessity. I'm assuming this kind of knowledge because you encountered things like this back in fluid mechanics in your undergraduate days. as well as to a certain extent in mechanics of materials, but mostly in fluid mechanics. So if you remember that back in fluid mechanics, the incompressibility condition, the famous incompressibility condition, that was represented mostly like delta dot v vector is equal to 0. Okay, so it is the same kind of form, except that now we are talking not about the velocity vector, rather the displacement vector. So what I have written in the first line is just a compact way of writing it. This is the expanded way of writing it. But this is not the end of it, because in addition to it, I have also written this kind of a thing, this special I. So this special I is simply the identity matrix, and that is basically this thing. Right. So this entire thing within the first bracket, that is just a scalar quantity. It involves partial derivatives, but you see this entire thing up to here, it was just a scalar quantity. That entire scalar quantity, if you think of it as like a k, some constant k, so that is getting multiplied with this one, that is getting multiplied with this one, that is getting multiplied with this one. So all throughout this thing, you will have this single scalar quantity placed in the diagonal positions. And remember that in the part A question, I have mentioned that this is the mean strain tensor. Okay, so the mean strain tensor is looking like this, where all the off diagonal elements are 0 and all the diagonal elements are given by this. Now I am also saying that overall the strain tensor is like this. That is what is given in the text just before the part A of the question. Now you know what is the full form of this epsilon in terms of epsilon 1, epsilon 1 to epsilon 1, 3 and all those things. And I have just now written the epsilon m. So it is just a simple algebra to find out this epsilon d or the deviatoric strain. So you proceed with that. Okay, and then you go back and look at all the text that I have written about the physical interpretation. Okay, and probably you should also be able to connect it with the previous question, the question number 3. So question number 3 and 4 are intrinsically connected. Okay, so I hope I have been able to give some more idea. Okay, if it is still not clear, you please ask later on. Okay, so I'll move on to the next question now. Devang Suresh Gandhi. Sir, I have a doubt. May I ask? Yes, please, sir. Devang, please ask.
Yes, sir. So this doubt's a very basic one, but I have this in my mind.
Okay.
So we used to study that the shear stresses are complementary in nature and they're equal and opposite in the perpendicular planes. So
you're talking about stresses.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Shear strain and stress, both of them are complementary. So, sir, EIJ, you told that practically in this matrix, the matrix is symmetric. So EIJ is equal to EJI. So, but in
Yes.
reality, while solving problems, the complementary stresses, they are negative of each other. They're in opposite directions. So just for the sake of writing matrix, we are considering it to be symmetric. But in real life, the complementary strain in the direction perpendicular would be in opposite direction.
So are you asking about stress or strain?
So both of them, the
So
shear
first
strains
of all,
and shear
so
stresses, both of them.
first of all, like you promise that you will never ever say this sentence that at least when you are talking about stresses, that one of them is the negative of the other. In terms of algebra, no, in terms of algebra, it is yes. Okay, in terms of algebra, it may look like that, but never ever say this thing that the shear stress is like that. Okay, I mean, you will get into big trouble with some big professors. It is just an arbitrary sense of orientation that we are assigning to our coordinate system, which is why you are getting things like that. Okay, which is why when you talk about maximum values of the shear stress, okay, it is better to think of it in terms of its magnitude. Okay, so if someone says, like if you ask what is the extreme value of the shear stress and you tell an answer like it is minus 72 megapascals, the person who is asking you will say that this person has gone crazy. Okay, so never ever state that shear stress, the maximum shear stress or things like that in negative form. It doesn't make any real world sense. That negative is only because of the way we are orienting our coordinate systems or whatever reference axis we are choosing. Now coming to the question of the shear strain, we should not be, it's okay to kind of draw an analogy between the stresses and the strains, but they are completely different things. And in order to interpret the strain, I would sincerely request you to please go and revise the geometrical interpretation of the shear strain. Okay, so if I can just briefly, very briefly, I won't get into too much detail about this because this is really undergraduate stuff, like first year undergraduate stuff. So what is the interpretation of the shear strains? So suppose you have two line segments which are perpendicular to each other like this. So Devang, are you able to see this writing
Yes.
app? Okay,
Yes,
so you are seeing these these two line segments which are right angles to each other, right? The initial angle, so let us say that this is the situation in the undeformed configuration. Forget about axis and everything. Okay, axis is just your choice. As an engineer who has to do calculations, you have to assign some coordinate axis, something to go ahead. But in reality, you just have these two line segments which you can draw on the surface of the body undergoing deformation. Now, after this body has undergone deformation, what may happen is that this line segment can rotate a little bit and become like this, and this line segment, maybe I use a different color. Let's say this color. So it becomes like this, and this one, it becomes like this. So the actual geometrical interpretation of the shear strain is that it is the change in this angle. So the change in the angle from the original 90 degrees, whatever it is, that is the shear strain. That is actually the, so that is the gamma, which you are more familiar with from your undergraduate days. And suppose it so happens that these two line segments happen to be parallel to the X and Y axis that we have chosen. Suppose it is like this, our X axis is like this, and our Y axis is like this. And these two line segments happen to be parallel to the X and the Y axis respectively. In that case, this gamma XY that I have said, okay, this gamma XY, that is equal to, so suppose this angle is θ1 and this angle is θ2, then your gamma XY is basically pi by 2 minus θ1. Let me just correct myself. And suppose this angle is alpha. So that is equal to this. And this is equal to θ1 plus θ2. That is what it is geometrically. Okay. Now, I think I mentioned in one of the previous classes, and if I have not, so here it is. The epsilon xy that we are talking about, that is just this gamma xy. Okay. And it just so happens that in terms of the partial derivatives, you can actually find out through a little bit of geometry and trigonometry that this is equal to that del u del y plus del v del x. Okay, I won't go into the details of how you are getting this thing. We have already gone into the details of it from a calculus point of view, but purely from a geometrical point of view, this interpretation was given to you in your first year mechanics, I believe. So you need to go back and revise that a little bit. And as you can see, this thing, the way that we're interpreting the shear strain here, it is completely different from the way that we need to think about stresses. It's a completely different picture. It's just in terms of the mathematics that it looks the same. Okay, and because it is like that, that is why this thing is perfectly equal to the epsilon yx. Okay, there is no other reason.
Okay, sir, I got it.
Yeah. Next question is by Akshay Kaushik. Sir, omega in the rigid body rotation is just a simple way to express capital omega. Is it true? Yes, it is. It is a simple way of expressing the capital omega, because in capital omega, effectively, you have three independent elements. So the presence of these three independent elements indicates to us that perhaps the entire information which is present in the capital omega second order tensor can be captured equivalently through a simple vector which has in it three elements also. Okay, so that is the trick that is involved there. So capital omega has effectively three independent elements. Three independent elements are also present in a vector. So effectively that capital omega is equivalently represented through a small omega, which is a vector. Next question is by Shivangshu Zamdani. Sir, in the rigid body rotation, when we have already considered that the strain is 0, the body is undeformed, then at the end, why you pointed the fact that overall deformation is small and equal the term right. So you see, just because you are saying that the strain is 0, and you have actually yourself rightly pointed out that just because we say that the strain is 0 does not mean that the d small x will be necessarily equal to the d capital X. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, that's what it is. But as long as you are considering small deformations, you are good, which is what we'll be doing mostly in this course. So you're perfectly all right.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Next question is by Lavinder. Doubt in question number 3. Can I ask? Yes, please, Lavinder.
Sir, half of the doubt is cleared when you wrote that epsilon 1 plus epsilon 2 plus epsilon 3, but when it is also given that rewrite this expression in terms of the...
I have a doubt. You are saying you have a doubt in question 3. Why didn't you ask this in autumn of 2019? I made you do this assignment sheet, I think twice, this particular problem twice, because you were late in submitting it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, and you did it once more. But okay, if you have a doubt, it's completely worthwhile to discuss it once more. So please go ahead and ask.
Just a small doubt. Rewrite this expression in terms of the components of displacement gradient Uij.
Yes.
So is it del U1 by del X1 plus del U2 by del X2 plus del U3 by del X3?
That Ui comma I?
Yes, Ui comma J. Rewrite this expression in terms of the components of displacement gradient. It comes out to be epsilon 1
Hang on. Just let me look at the question. This expression in terms of the components of the displacement gradient Uij. Right. So the displacement gradient is Ui comma J, which is actually del Ui del Xj. So that is the entire displacement gradient second order tensor. So what I'm saying is that you write the dilatation basically in terms of the various components of this, and you're perfectly all right in saying that this will ultimately come out to be del U1 del X1 plus del U2 del X2 plus del U3 del X3. Okay, so basically the diagonal elements of that Ui comma J.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Next is a question by Akshay Kaushik again. Sir, where is finite strain used? Can you relate finite strain with our BTech students? Could you please distinguish between finite, infinitesimal engineering and true strain apart from mathematical formulation? So no, I cannot do it apart from mathematical formulation. I can do it within the context of mathematical formulation. So it is like this. So finite strain, as I had mentioned a number of times, we have to use it when the magnitude of the displacement gradient components, that is the any of the 6 or any of the 9 independent elements of del Ui del Xj, all the 9 different components that is possible from del Ui del Xj, if their magnitudes are not small, compared to 1, then you have to use the finite strain. Where is it used? So in modeling biological tissues, which can be from the human body or animal bodies, in modeling polymeric materials, so rubber-like materials, as well as for considering a number of very modern kind of applications, one of which I have a little bit of experience in working as part of my own research. Some of my PhD students are also working on that. So when we consider the next generation of lithium-ion batteries that are used in our mobile phones and laptops, instead of the more traditional materials, people are thinking of, the scientists and the material scientists and the chemists, they are thinking of putting in silicon in one side of the battery. Now, silicon is a very special kind of material in the sense that when you are charging it, okay, suppose you make a battery out of silicon and you charge it, that silicon is going to increase in volume by a huge amount. It actually increases by more than 300% by volume. Okay, so it seems almost like unbelievable, but people have carried out experiments and this is like a proven fact, a proven experimental fact. So in that, if you have to model silicon properly, then you actually have to consider finite strains, which is what my students do almost on a daily basis. Okay, so one of your seniors, Ganesh, who is a teaching assistant here, he's present today. So his MTech project work will also be in that area, and he will be, well, at least the current plan is that he will be also working with finite strains. So it is very much an applicable thing. Infinitesimal strain you are all familiar with. In most common engineering structures, all the traditional structures like concrete, wood, steel, where the strains are really not very large, then infinitesimal strain is the thing. Now, engineering strain, I'm not going to go into the true strain part, okay? Because once we do that, what is stopping us from doing, let's say, Henke strain or some other logarithmic strain and so on and so forth. So engineering strain I have actually mentioned in my lecture notes. So so if you just look at the definition of that, it is the closest thing that you have to the definition you learned in your school. Except the only difference is that now, as part of our applied elasticity course, we have defined the engineering strain to be in terms of those infinitesimal vectors, d small x and d capital X. But other than that, if you're thinking in terms of the deformed configuration and the current and the original configuration, it is just like final length minus initial length divided by initial length. Okay, so that is how we try to connect with our previous studies through this engineering strain concept. But as we have seen that the engineering strain can actually be represented in a very sophisticated fashion using the unit vectors, and the formula was n hat transpose epsilon n hat. Okay, I don't know if I made myself clear or not, but I hope I've given you some idea about why we're doing all these things separately. So the next question is by Jyotirmoy Brahma. Sir, while finding the maximum of engineering strain, you mentioned that we can't differentiate directly as constraint is not imposed. Please elaborate what constants and how do we ensure its imposition? I didn't get that part. So the constraint is that so when you're talking about that ni or the nk, that is a unit vector, and you have to respect that is the constraint. Okay, so the dot product of the n hat, the unit vector itself with itself, that must be equal to 1. So arbitrarily you cannot do it. That is the restriction that is imposed. That is the only thing. Okay, and please don't think that it is the maximization of the engineering strain. So we're just doing a first partial derivative of it. It is strictly speaking the extremization. Okay, you're finding out the extremum values of the engineering strain through that process. The next question is by Shivanshu Zamdagni again. In crash analysis, in crash analysis, a vehicle body undergo large deformation causing high strain generation. Yes, Shivangshu, that is true. Large deformation, as well as there is another very important thing to consider in crashes, which is that the deformation rates are also very high. Okay, so for a proper modeling of that kind of a situation, we also need to consider the rates at which the deformations are taking place. Dipanshu is next asking in problem sheet number 2 in question 6 how to find the roots of cubic equation or principal strains with the help of cubic equation or invariance in question. Oh, that's a separate thing. You are asking at the same time. So Dipanshu, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, sir. Hello.
Dipanshu,
Hello.
are you there? Yes.
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Please ask. So what is the difficulty in finding the roots of the cubic equation?
Sir, we have to guess the first solution in finding
Use
the
your
roots of the
calculator.
cubic.
Did you hear me, Dipanshu? You can use
Yes,
your
sir.
calculator to find the roots of the cubic equation.
How, sir?
Sorry? I can't hear you. So look at the manual. If you don't know how to find out the roots of cubic equation using your calculator, you please take a look at the manual of the calculator if you have not thrown it away. Or I'm sure there will be some YouTube video on telling you how to find out the roots of a cubic equation. It's not that difficult. Okay, we all used to do it in our undergraduate days. And 15-16 years ago, if it was available, it is there in your calculator also. Okay, so don't worry about it. Your next question is in question 8, in the first question in second term, the partial differentiation should be with respect to x in. Oh, let me see. In question 8 in first equation. In the second term, yes, right. So the del square epsilon yy del x square. You're right. So I'll make those corrections. That's a typing mistake. In question 11a, I'm unable to solve it, sir. For 11. Yeah, I can understand. Okay, so what I would suggest is that you try the others. Okay, question number 11, you try the others. Let's see if I don't want to give away the solution just like that. So let others also try. At the end, I'll give you the solution. Okay, if I forget to give you the solution, Dipanshu, please remind me. So before moving on to the next chapter on stress, or maybe even if we move on to the next chapter in stress, sometime later I can provide you with the solution. In question 12, E theta theta, it seems like it is not complete. Really? Question 12. Epsilon theta theta. I'll check. I don't remember these expressions always. I think there should be a UR by R term there. 1 by R del U theta del theta plus UR by R. Another term should be there, I think. I'll check. All right. Thank you. Very pinpointed questions. Nice. Next question is by Shubham Uttam Hegde. How do you find UVW from strain tensor? You will have 6 equations, but 3 unknowns. That's where strain compatibility comes in. But those equations are in terms of strain tensor components, not in terms of UVW. So Shubham, are you commenting on this thing or are you asking something? I did not quite understand what you are writing here.
I'm asking.
So what is your question?
So in 3a, you asking or for u of I comma j. So in the
In
book
question
u of
number 3A.
yeah.
In question number 3A. So I'm just asking you to write down the expression. You don't have to find anything. You don't have to find out the UVW. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking rewrite this expression, rewrite the expression for the dilatation, which is given in terms of the volume, in terms of the components of the displacement gradient, not in terms of the displacements themselves. So you have to just stop when you have obtained the expression in terms of del U1, del X1, whatever that is.
But if I wanted to find, then how could I find it?
So if you have in your hand the expressions for the strains,
Yeah.
suppose in terms of XYZ, like I have explained in kinematics part 10 pre-recorded lecture, that example I showed you where I deliberately gave you a wrong example. So epsilon, I think I gave something like epsilon xx equal to y square and the other two as 0. So if you have a situation like that where you know the expressions of the strain components in terms of x, y, z, whatever, and you are required to find out the UVW from that, it is just a question of uh, of solving those partial differential equations. Now, the only issue is that if somehow your strain field, the various components of the strains are incompatible to begin with, then you are going to get into trouble with the UVW. But of course, if we set a question like this in the test, then I mean, unless otherwise stated, you can assume that it is going to be a compatible strain field. Okay, and then you have to actually solve. So what you will do is, suppose epsilon xx is equal to some function of x and y. So what you will do is you'll just write del u del x equal to that, then del v del y similarly from the expression for the epsilon yy, and all these things you'll have to solve one by one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you will end up with functions of y, z, all these things. Okay, it can become a little bit messy, but it can be done, but not always. Okay, it's not always that easy. Yeah. Devang Suresh Gandhi is again asking, unable to get the answer of question 7. Let me see what is question 7. Really? Consider a strain field such that we have this thing. Find the relationship between A and B such that it's possible to obtain a single valued continuous displacement field which corresponds to the given strain field. So this is just a fancy way of saying, so when I'm saying that to obtain a single valued continuous displacement field, basically it means that just ensure that the strain field given is compatible. Okay, and I mean, the way you should proceed here is that you write down try to find out the displacement field, and eventually you will run into some kind of a problem unless you can satisfy some sort of relationship between the B and A, and that relationship is that B is equal to twice A. So Devang, can you at least share with us by unmuting yourself what you tried in this question number 7, or there was some problem in understanding the question itself?
So no, so I got the question very well, but the thing is that B equal to 2A, that condition would come if somehow F wasn't these the functions F and G which come after. So that functions will come now that del U by del X1 is equals to AX square 2. So U will be some function of so those additional constant functions are not getting deleted. That's why how to explain it. So I've solved it, but some terms are not cancelling out. If they do, then B will become equal to
in the kinematics discussion channel, you post your solution, so we'll take a look.
Okay.
All right. Next, Yash Haresh Bhai Bhayani is asking, sir, till topic of rigid body rotation, we were talking about deformation and displacement. And in rigid body rotation topic, we manipulated the equation of displacement vector, and there we got an antisymmetric, which is rotation matrix. Why like that? So any matrix, any 3×3 matrix, you can decompose into a symmetric and an antisymmetric part, and we are giving the interpretations for that. The symmetric part is the strain, and the antisymmetric part we are showing that is the rotation. And that is a rotation because we are saying that if you have like the feeling of rotation is coming because when we consider that to be small, you're actually getting a term like a rigid body rotation. Okay, I don't know how better to describe that. But the fact remains that the moment you have any 3×3 matrix, you can always decompose it into its symmetric and antisymmetric parts. The question becomes, what is the physical interpretation of it? So the symmetric part here is the strain, and the antisymmetric part is the rotation. So yes, does it answer your question somewhat? Or do you want to perhaps unmute yourself and ask?
Yes, sir, I want to unmute. I was asking that it was totally displacement and deformation.
Yes.
We had that term, the first term of strain tensor, the symmetric term.
Yes.
We used in strain tensor, but
yes.
The following term of antisymmetric part,
yes,
the terms will be same, just we have a minus sign. So does that make a lot of difference that we are giving it a new name, that is rotation tensor?
Yes, it makes a world of difference. So strain tensor and the rotation tensor, they're completely separate things. It's not just A minus. Okay, it's a completely separate thing. If one is the symmetric part, one is the antisymmetric part, it is not looking like the same, and we are just not naming it something else.
Okay, sir. And sir,
yeah.
if we are
So
considering
in the previous sections, when we were developing our theory, starting from the displacement and the deformation concept, naturally it evolved that we were talking about this del ui del x xj plus del uj del xi kind of terms. But suppose you started out just from the displacement gradient strain tensor, the del ui del xj. So that is a tensor of order 2, and that can be equivalently represented as a 3×3 matrix. And just like any matrix, that can be decomposed into its symmetric and antisymmetric parts. So whatever we have discussed in the previous sections can actually be completely done away with, and like in a very linear algebra kind of style, we can just start with the displacement gradient and when talk about it. But of course, it would not be a very physical way of describing things. Okay.
And sir, yes, we are talking about rigid body rotation, and we have the same expression in fluid mechanics also for rotation. So,
yes. So in the context of learning vorticity, you come across exactly the same kind of thing.
Yes, sir.
So there you have the velocity gradient term, the del vi del xj, and then the symmetric part of it is the strain rate or the rate of deformation tensor, and the other one is the rotation tensor from which you define the vorticity.
Yes. So it is applicable to deformable bodies, we can say, because
absolutely. In fact, for fluid mechanics also, whatever we have defined here, the displacement gradient and all these things, you can define it for a fluid body also, because that is also a continuum. But there is no practical use of it, because the constitutive relations in the most of the constitutive relations in fluid mechanics, especially when dealing with Newtonian fluids, you only have to deal with the strain rates and not the strains.
Okay.
Yeah. Devang Suresh Gandhi is asking how to write strain tensor in polar coordinates. Oh, $1 million question. Well, you can proceed in a very, very sophisticated fashion by considering the proper tensor calculus formalism of it, which you would learn if you ever did a course on continuum mechanics, or at least for our purposes, the closest thing that I can tell you is that maybe later on, when we are dealing with with this chapter on 2D elasticity, we will be discussing these things. Okay, so please wait around for that time. We'll do certain things there. Maybe some things will become clear. Okay, let us not waste time on that algebraic manipulation right now. Dipanshu is next asking, in question 16, we need to find the condition or show that deformation is isochoric as dilatation comes out as A minus B. Let me see the question. If the displacement field is given by this U1, U2 and U3, show that the deformation is isochoric. So maybe there is some problem with the wording. I'll check once more, okay? I'll check once more. Okay, so I have written it like show that the deformation is isochoric. Perhaps I should have completed by saying that if A is equal to B. So I'll check that. Next question is by where did it go? Shubham Uttam Hegade. There is no way to install SymPy in Windows. Anaconda command doesn't work. There is no pip command to install those libraries. GitHub clone doesn't have Cadabra 2. Can you try that question with NumPy? Of course, you can try with NumPy by giving some special values. Shubham, are you trying to say something? So, Monirul Hassan, I think you have unmuted yourself inadvertently. Please mute yourself. So Shubham, you can very much.
Yes, sir.
Monirul, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. Shubham, you can very much install Anaconda. Okay, I also use Windows.
Okay, I have Anaconda, but Cadabra 2 wasn't installing with Anaconda.
Why do you need Cadabra?
SymPy doesn't have Cadabra.
Why do you need Cadabra?
For tensor functions are in Cadabra according to documentation.
You don't need tensor functions. You don't need any extra library for that. Okay, so the way that will proceed, you can simply do with SymPy. There is absolutely no necessity to install any extra library for tensor functions. There are some specialized modules as part of the physics package also, which deal with tensors. You don't have to do that. Absolutely. Okay, yeah. In fact, I want that you don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay, like even if it was very easily accessible, I would have asked you not to do it. And if it is not really easily accessible, good. Whatever we'll do, we'll use only SymPy, NumPy, but mostly SymPy. Okay, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question is by the way, I noticed that we are already at 6 o'clock. So officially, whoever wants to leave, most welcome to leave. But if you want to hang around, I'll be here for a little bit more time. Okay, but not too much. Okay, next question is Balasaheb Pandit Bhosle is asking dxi is equal to yes. So I think you meant that within the absolute values you wanted to write perhaps dx bar. So ni. Yes, the ni is very much along the dxi. I am finding this relation inappropriate mentioned in the lecture. Why is that, Balasaheb? Why do you find it inappropriate?
Sir, that dx1 means on LHS, if we consider dx1 and we try to find magnitude on RHS, then ni magnitude is 1. So no, on RHS magnitude.
No. So on the left hand side, you are saying that you want to take the dx1 component. Then on the right hand side also, you must take the n1 component of the ni vector.
But sir, it is a ni is a unit vector along. Okay.
So if you are saying ni is a unit vector, then dxi is also a vector, right? So if you're thinking in terms of the entire vector, you have to be consistent in the way that you are thinking about the left hand side and the right hand side. So if you're thinking the I represents the indicial notation vector representation, then dxi is a vector, true, it is the entire vector, and on the right hand side also the dx bar magnitude that captures the magnitude of it, and the ni represents the entire vector of it. But if you substitute I equal to 1, then you are only thinking about the component along the x direction or the one direction. Then the dx1 has a magnitude, is a certain component. It is not carrying the entire magnitude of the dx vector, which is why on the right hand side it makes sense that you are also talking about the one component of the n vector.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
So got it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So Rahul Agarwal is asking, okay, that's about Jupyter. I'm not getting into that right now. Again, Shubham is also saying something. So I'm not getting into the discussions about Python right now. Gyandeep Borgohain is asking, sir, in question 1, we are asked to find the infinitesimal strain tensor, but if only strain tensor is mentioned in the question, what do we need to find? Finite infinitesimal strain tensor. If nothing else is mentioned, you please assume that I mean the infinitesimal strain tensor. Okay, absolutely. When nothing is mentioned, when no adjective is there, it is the infinitesimal strain tensor. Strain tensor in polar coordinates are asked in question 12. This is question by Devang Suresh Gandhi. Yes, I have asked the question on polar coordinates. You don't have to derive it. That's why I've given, because I did not want you to derive it right now. That's why I've given you the expressions. You just substitute the expressions. So which is why probably question number 12 is the easiest question in all of this problem sheet. You just have to go ahead simply with the thing. It's just a matter of plugging in the values.
Yes, sir, that's true. But I got all those value ER theta, E theta, theta, ERR. But how to place them in the matrix was my question. Because the term, the 2-2 term, the second row, second column, that doesn't match from any of these three.
Are you talking about?
Sir, E theta theta expression is.
Achha, this my epsilon theta theta is expression is wrong, I think. So somebody else pointed it out. So there should be a plus UR by R.
Yes, sir, plus U theta by R according to that fluid mechanics equation.
Not U theta, not U theta. U plus UR by R.
Okay.
Please check, but I'm never confident with these expressions. I never remember all this. Okay, so I'll check up and see.
Sir, and also one more thing, while studying fluid mechanics, this radial ERR in that in the bracket there used to be R into UR, and in the division there used to be R delta R.
Which one? Hello? Devang, can you hear me? Hello, Devang, can you hear me? We'll come back to him. Next, Dipanshu is asking in question 17, answer is coming as E2 hat or E3 hat, but one answer is given in terms of E1 hat, but we need to find the answer in X2, X3 plane. Question 17. Yeah, that is probably a typing mistake. I'll check though. Thanks. Yeah, I think that E1 hat should be E2. I'll check nonetheless. So Devang, are you back? Maybe net connection problem with him. So since for a number of things I have mentioned that I would need to check with I need to check up and make some corrections in the problem sheet. So the particular students who ask those questions, it is your responsibility to ensure that I actually keep my promise. Okay. of actually correcting that problem sheet. For example, question 16 or whatever 17 and other things. I'm already forgetting. So whoever asks those questions, and I promise that I'll check up and you have to follow up. Okay, so in the discussion channels of kinematics, you please follow up that if I have not made the corrections very soon, maybe by tomorrow or something. All right. Gyandeep is asking, sir, if you are not familiar with Python, do we need to learn? Yes, you will need to learn Python because your group term project will be in using Python. Okay, and I have chosen Python for two reasons. First of all, it is completely open source, so you don't have to get access to anything like MATLAB or things like that. And Python is actually very easy. Okay, and of course there are added advantages of learning Python that you can put in your CV and it looks attractive. So I would actually want you to learn Python. And last year, like your seniors, they picked it up quite well, like really quite well. So I think if they can do it, I'm sure you too can. Devang, are you back? So Hitesh, don't worry about it. We will share some resources about learning Python. Okay, and if it is necessary that I'll also make some videos. So don't worry. I mean, as long as you have very basic level, and see, it's not that you have to go and learn Python like a software programmer or anything like that. We'll use Python basically to make our life easier with the very tedious and long algebra that will that we require to make our life like bearable for 2D elasticity. So some of the problems involving the polar coordinates can become really messy and very long derivations. So we'll use the symbolic Python to make our life easy. Okay, it is not a question of learning Python. It is just a use of utilizing Python to make our life easy. Yes, Devang. Are you back?
Yes, I'm back now. Yes.
Okay, good. So you were saying something.
Was that discussion going on for that polar coordinate question? Some
Right.
value would have been drawn.
Right. So what was that?
No, so I just said that I thought that the ERR value of a strain in radial direction given was it was I don't know if, because in fluid mechanics there was some other equation given for ERR in radial direction strain.
Really? So first of all, in fluid mechanics, whatever you studied, that was the strain rate. It looked the same because in some textbooks they use the symbol U or the variable U for velocity also. But you understand that the units are different. In fluid mechanics, it was per second.
There U is velocity, here it's displacement.
And here it is displacement. So the strains here are unitless. But in terms of just the algebraic expressions, they should look the same. The epsilon RR and whatever you studied in earlier, that should absolutely look the same. You check once.
Okay,
go and
sir,
check
yes.
once. Yeah, let me know. Okay, so I think if you don't have any more questions, maybe you can conclude this session. So whoever is recording this, I think Ganesh is recording this. So Ganesh, you can stop the recording now.
Sir, also I didn't get 13, 14 and 6.